Hey there gamer, welcome to my review of Okami. Why am I reviewing a game that came out in 2006?
Because you got kinda timing.
No. It's because Okami was amazing. And it's still amazing, and I don't know about you, but lately the games I've played have been short on the whole amazing thing. So I'm going to explain why Okami was great when it first came out and why it's still great today. Let's start with the story. 100 years ago in the land of Nippon, the village of Kamaka has to offer a human sacrifice to the cave-dwelling 8-headed demon Orochi. But one year, a brave warrior named Nagi and a mysterious white wolf called Shiryu did battle with the beast and slew him. But Shiryu was gravely wounded and later died from her injuries. 100 years later, at the Moon Cave, the final resting place of the foul beast, a foolish warrior named Sasano stole the magical sword that held the dark essence of Orochi in check. This, of course, resurrected the ancient evil.
Not the sharpest blade in the armory, that one.
The monster then laid a terrible curse on the land. But a friendly wood sprite named Sakura isn't about to take that lying down. So she uses the last of her power to reawaken the spirit of Amaterasu, the true identity of the fallen Shiryu. Now, Ami isn't taking on the forces of darkness alone. Her constant companion is a Ponchal, think Navi but less irritating, named Issen. Apparently, unlike Gandalf, death kinda takes the wind out of poor Ami's sails. So to get back into fighting shape, she must seek out the 13 celestial brush gods. That's the 12 animals of the Chinese zodiac, plus that cat. This is where Okami's most unique feature comes into play.
Oh, how witty that must have sounded in your head.
It's called the Celestial Brush. At any point, you can pause the game and use any of the brush techniques you've collected so far. They do all kinds of cool stuff. Fix things, make plants grow, winds blow, bring out the sun, or raise the moon. This stuff really comes in handy in side quests or helping out the good people of Nippon,
Who are apparently too busy to solve their own problems.
But combat is where the Celestial Brush really shines. Especially when Ami can start throwing fire and lightning around like a proper angry goddess. So Ami and Issen set out to defeat the dreaded Orochi. Along the way, Lassie wrecks the of some nifty boss monsters, including a giant spider queen and a crazy cowman. But finally, it's 0 hour, and with a little help from Susanoo,
Very little.
Ami defeats the beast. But get this, the game's only like a fourth over. No sooner is Orochi, that old worm, pushing daisies, than every undergrad from Mordor Community College is trying to claim Dark Lord status, including a 9-tailed fox, a sentient toxic cloud, a whole bunch more spiders, and Clockwork's dopey twin cousins, Niku and Liku. Then things get sorta weird. Over the course of her adventures, Ami runs into some pretty unusual things. Strange ruins, advanced technology, and a Frenchman who can tell the future. Apparently, all the evil in the world was caused by aliens. And all the monsters in the world came to Nippon on a big flying boat called the Ark of Yamato, along with Yama, the ruler of all evil. He looks like a giant ball, but is in reality a small fish in a jar. Not since Final Fantasy X have I seen such a strange final boss. Yama packs a bigger punch than old Yu Yevon though, so the last fight of the game is pretty good. Now let's talk about the colorful cast of characters you'll meet on this crazy journey. My favorite is, of course, Amaterasu Okami, doggy goddess of the sun and a true hero, with the strength and determination to stand against the greatest evils of the land. She also gets in plenty of laughs, mostly acting as the straight man, girl, dog, wolf, to circumstances and her buddy and envoy, Issen. Speaking of Issen, he's a fun guy. Since Ami is a silent protagonist, someone needs to do the talking, and the wandering artist is just the man for the job. He's awesome in a rascally sort of way, and despite any perfectly reasonable concerns he might have about charging into battle against monstrosities, he would never leave Ami's side.
You mean head.
And in the end, he actually saves her. This sort of ties into a pet peeve of mine. You see, in a lot of fantasy stories, it holds that a magical being's powers, if not existence, are dependent on humanity's belief in it. Example, the excellent Rise of the Guardians or the kinda sucky Clash of the Titans reboot. I much prefer the situation in H.P. Lovecraft's Call of Cthulhu, where the old ones are terrifyingly real. If something is objectively real, it should be real whether or not people choose to believe in it. It makes me worry that Ami is some kind of a mass hallucination. Now let's talk about the big bad, Yama. Okay, this one's just odd. In the later stages of the game, the bosses especially take on a very mechanical look. This makes them fitting antagonists for a nature goddess like Ami. But Orochi and the other big bads are blight the earth with filth and darkness types. The little fishy also sports the same markings as Ami, so is he a lost brush god? Honestly, he's not well explained at all. Now let's go over the bleach blonde french fry inexplicably in feudal Japan, Waka. He's Ami's main rival.
His biggest competition's a dog. For shame.
He's a lot of fun. His pseudo-prophecies range from ridiculously obscure to laugh-out-loud silly, and the way he messes with Ami and Isen is a joy to watch. He has a history with Amaterasu, and by the end he proves to be a true friend of the sun goddess. Then there's Orochi, or as I call him, the real main antagonist of the game. He's the one who blights the land, he attacked Ami's home way before the game began, and you fight him 3 times. He wants to be god of the underworld, and he's a big monster with 8 heads that spit different flavors of death. Way cooler than old Fishball, I think. The last character I'll talk about is Ninetales. He spends a lot of time manipulating Ami in the form of a priestess named Ro, before revealing himself to be the wannabe brush god ruler of Oni Island. He murders one of Ami's key allies and is just generally a gigantic hole. He's basically an evil version of Ami, so by the time you get to fight him, it's a pleasure to prove that Amaterasu may be imitated, but she's never duplicated. But that's only the tip of the iceberg. If I was going to talk about every colorful character and memorable encounter, we'd be here all day. So, in no particular order, there's Crazy Basket Head Man, a princess and her strike force of warrior dogs, a nutty professor, a gang of sparrows that run a bathhouse, the Emperor of Nippon, Hawkeye, a bamboo girl from space, and an electrically charged ghost named Raiden. The story in Okami may be strange, but it really grabs you and holds your attention. And that's thanks to the wonderful cast of total nuts, the mix of fantasy, action, comedy, and those moments of pure heart that really get you to care about this nonsense. Now, since this is a game, just for and giggles, let's talk about the gameplay.
You're so avant-garde, Private.
I know, right? Okami may be a true original in many ways, but at its heart, it's fundamentally a Zelda clone. You begin as a piss-weak shadow of who you'll soon be, with no health, no weapons, no powers, and no special moves. But by the end, you can pretty much simply walk into Mordor. In order to reach this state of ultra-bad attitude, you need praise. That's right. The equivalent of XP in Okami is people basically saying,
Say, dead dog. Oh, that's a good fella.
You can spend your collected praise in 4 separate areas. Solar energy, that's just the equivalent of hearts in Zelda. Then there's ink pots. Now this is where I go to spend my praise first, as ink is what fuels your celestial brush. Then there's the astral pouch. This is basically an extra life. Apparently it's a magic bag that Ami stuffs food in, and it can bring her back from the point of death. You can have up to 4 of these. Each one needs 200 units of food.
Food comes in units now?
This is by no means an essential item. In your average encounter with the lesser minions of darkness, Ami's not even going to get her coat mussed. I think one of the bosses killed me once, and I'm not a great gamer by any stretch. Where you're going to need these are in the super hard optional encounters, but I'll get to those in a minute. Then there's the wallet. There's a lot to buy in Nippon after all. Mostly they're consumable items that either buff Ami's attack or defense, recover solar energy, create holy force fields, reflect enemy attacks, or just plain explode. And 95% of the time you're not going to need any of them. You're better off saving your yen to spend at kindly old Mr. Miyagi's place, where he'll teach Ami some kung fu. Whoa. But yen isn't the only currency in Nippon. The other is demon fangs. These can only be gotten in combat, and they can be used to purchase some serious upgrades, like items that let Ami walk on the surface of water, or increase the rate at which her ink pots refill. The last thing I'll say about praise is there's actually too much of it. You get praise for helping people, purifying the land, being nice to animals, and finding special praise caches in the form of clovers. The amount of praise in the game will beef up casual players enough to take out the big bads, but obsessive completionists will quickly find that they have a whole lot of wolfy love and nothing to do with it. Now let's really dig into those brush powers. They fall into 3 overall categories. The first is combat. These let Ami dispatch monsters in new and exciting ways. Then there's exploration. These are Metroid-esque abilities that help Ami reach parts of the level she wouldn't normally be able to. The last category changes the environment in some way, like Ami's sun and moon trick, but she can also create gusts of wind, fix broken objects, or make plants bloom. Bloom. A lot of the powers have a secondary version that fits into one of the other categories. As an example, the wind power is used to solve environmental puzzles, but it can also be used to disrupt the barriers protecting certain enemies, and there's a special version that creates a killer tornado around Ami. The bomb technique is used to blow baddies to Kingdom Come, but it can also open up new areas for exploration.
Just as it does in Hyrule.
And that brings me to the combat. Nippon plays host to all kinds of ghosts and goblins. Now, Okami has a bad habit of reskinning the lower ranks of the armies of darkness. You'll come across 5 separate versions of your basic soldier-type enemy. Up close and personal melee guy, underground guy, ranged combat guy, flying guy, and bunch of around him elite guy. But that's just the beginning. There are these wheel-like things that try and run circles around you while throwing various flavors of fire, ice, and pain at poor Ami. There are these hard-shelled dudes who need special treatment from one of the brush techniques before you can hurt them directly. There are things that fly, and giant armored cow monsters that can really dish out the damage. Most of the fights are no holds barred. Use whatever kind of brush techniques and weapons you want fights. But some of the bad guys who outweigh Ami by about 500 buckets of fried chicken can really dish out the damage and are immune to most offensive brush techniques. But the worst are the human-type enemies. They're flat out completely immune to fire, lightning, sharp blades, and swirling winds, so Ami has to rely on her primary weapons. She can charge into battle with rosary beads, my personal favorite, big fat swords, and even mirrors.
Sounds like a good way to get about a bajillion years of bad luck.
Each one can be equipped as either a primary or a sub-weapon, and its position radically changes its function. In primary mode, rosary beads are basically a whip. As a sub-weapon, though, Ami fires beads like a gun. The real showpiece of Okami's combat are the boss fights. Like its spiritual predecessor Zelda, Okami's boss fights are equal parts combat and puzzle solving. You need to get Orochi wasted off sake to beat him, you have to use magic vines to expose giant spider weak points, and in my personal favorite battle, the one with Ninetales, he comes equipped with his own evil version of Ami's celestial brush. The boss battles in the game are fantastic. The only problem is Okami is shameless in how it recycles them. I already mentioned you fight Orochi 3 separate times, but there's a friggin' horde of spiders, and one of the bosses, a guy named Crimson Helm, gets reskinned over and over again as a regular old, if bad, enemy. Now let's talk about Ami's secret weapon. You know how in some fighting games you get a taunt move? Well, there's one of those in Okami, and it's exploding poop. You heard me. Exploding poop. Now let's look at the levels. Okami is a sort of pre-open world game. There are a bunch of big levels connected together. This sort of cuts down on the overall sprawl of everything and limits exploration, but not by much. There's still a lot to see. I already made a Metroid comparison, but there are all sorts of hidden nooks and crannies to explore for prizes. Now, because the whole game is set in one island nation, they're not particularly geographically diverse. There's no desert level, no space station level, but considering the locale, the different regions of Nippon are able to stand apart from one another. There's a forest, some ruins, a spooky castle, and a frozen tundra. Okay, now let's break down the good and the bad in Okami. Considering that games are a visual medium, let's start with the visuals. And oh my, is Okami just gorgeous. Initially, the creators of the game, Clover Studios, were planning on a more realistic art style. But instead they opted for this cel-shaded look reminiscent of Japanese woodcuts. And did that ever make a difference? The art style and the themes of the game go hand in hand. From the blighted areas with their sinister floating kanjis, to seeing flowers burst into bloom as Ami runs. And when one of those curse zones gets dissipated, it looks like you're bringing a dead world back to life.
Private, you are such a hippie.
And the sight of thousands of cherry blossoms swirling in the breeze is just majestic. The character designs are exaggerated and cartoony, which fits well with the comic overtones and antics of the game. A sense of humor is a great thing to have. It builds the audience rapport with the characters, so when bad things happen to them, you feel bad. Now, if variety is the spice of life, Okami is a zesty dish indeed. There's always something to do in addition to kicking monsters. There are secrets to find, races to win, fish to catch, and sights to see. Oh, and the collectibles. There's one absolute bear of a side quest that involves finding these things called strand beads. Most aren't all that hard to find, but for others you need to do things like basically fight all the monsters in the world in an endurance match from hell, win an absurdly dangerous race through basically the Everfree Forest, and fight Blockhead. I hate Blockhead. If you played the game, you know this. Hole, as well as the pain that comes from getting your butt kicked over and over and over again by a wall.
Personally, I found it delightfully entertaining.
But it's the right kind of challenge. I mean, I didn't have to do all this. The game didn't make me, but the reward is worth it. It takes the entire game, but during the next game you get to start, you'll be in possession of a thing called the Strand of Beads. Creative name, I know. But once you have this thing, the new game you start is basically over. You get infinite health, infinite ink, and everything dies with just one hit. So yeah. On the downside, the game's structure is just odd. The real final boss gets dead a fourth of the way in, then it's Ami versus a demonic conga line of big bads, until that completely out of left field alien overlord fish thing. Next, the game can be sort of redundant. Reskinned monsters, repeated boss fights. Okay, the spiders were my choice to tackle, but Orochi 3 times with no wrinkles? Come on! The game also treats you like a child star, namely throwing way too much money and praise at you, way too fast, and then by the end you have nothing to spend it on but sake. Lastly, no voice acting. Everyone speaks in this kinda Simlish. But this is like minor stuff. So whatever. If you're gonna twist my arm, I'd give Okami a 5 out of 5. But that's not as important as what we can learn from this true original of a game. The first lesson to take from Okami is the art style. It's a PS2 game and it still looks phenomenal. Because the creators went for an original, eye-catching style instead of graphical fidelity. Second, Okami is built on a tried-and-true formula. The Zelda formula. But Clover made a lot of cosmetic changes, like swapping out keys and locks for arrows and little Cyclops demons that hold doors shut. But they also created a truly outstanding gameplay gimmick. Yeah, I said it, the Celestial Brush is a gimmick, but it's used a lot and in a lot of different ways. So does any other game need calligraphy powers? The answer is obviously no. And I'm okay with that. Now, Okami is a comedy in a lot of ways, and I think it's a good thing to remember for games like Gears of War, Call of Duty, and Halo that it's important to take a breather and maybe crack a couple jokes between gunfights.
What'd you say, Private?
Nothing, Sergeant.
That's what I thought.
And lastly, even though Clover has gone the way of the dinosaurs, Okami has survived, with its sequel, Okamiden, that I didn't play, and Ami's recent appearance in Marvel vs. Capcom. If you're interested in more reviews of anime, movies, TV shows, video games, or comic books, check out my channel on YouTube at StupidPrivate913, and find me on Facebook for updates about future videos and more. Thanks for watching.
Hey kids, today's show is brought to you by the letter 4 and the number potato! I'm a stupid private.